Hello there. In this video, we yet again take a look at the Boox Note Air 3C, or 3C as we'll call it from here on out. And in this particular case, we're going to look at how apps perform on the device. So you get a really good sense of how the device performs in a number of scenarios: reading books, reading comics, reading magazines, going through news feeds, even watching YouTube. We'll have samples of all of that in this video today. So half of the video is really, or at least one of the goals, is really about just looking at the performance of this device and how it handles those different tasks. But the other thing that we're going to do is we're going to compare the 3C to the Tab Ultra C. And the reason why we're doing this comparison is when the 3C was first announced, it was announced in conjunction with another device, which released a couple weeks after the 3C, called the Boox Tab Ultra C Pro. And I think a lot of people are asking the question, do they purchase the 3C or do they purchase the Ultra Pro? And I think that this video is going to help you to determine the difference between those two devices and which direction you might want to go. Now, of course, to do that, I don't have the Ultra Pro, I actually have the Ultra C. So is that a valid comparison? I think it is. And the reason why is the Ultra C was released only a few months earlier, approximately 6 months, give or take, than the Ultra C Pro. So the devices have a lot in common. And a lot of areas where they differ isn't relevant to the things that I'll be reviewing in this video today. So I'll give you 4 examples of that. One of the advantages of the Pro model is that it has 6 gigabytes of RAM compared to 4 for the Ultra C. But none of the apps that we're going to be testing out today push the limits of those 4 gigabyte of RAM. So the extra 2 gigabytes doesn't mean anything in these demonstrations. In a similar fashion, the Pro model also is a little bit lighter, has a little bit of a more improved keyboard case connector, and actually has a smaller battery, oddly enough, than the Tab Ultra C. But regardless of all those differences, none of them are factors as it relates to the things that we'll cover today. Now, there is one thing, however, that could be a factor, and that's the processor. Both the Tab Ultra C and the C Pro offer octa-core processors, but the Ultra C, I think, runs about 2 gigahertz in their performance cores, whereas the Ultra C Pro runs 2.8 gigahertz. And that's a pretty substantial difference. And could that difference, be significant as it relates to the test that I'm about to do? It's possible they could. I don't think that they will. I think if there's any differences at all, the differences will probably be subtle. So I still think that the Ultra C overall is a great proxy for what we're going to cover today and represents the Pro pretty well. We'll know better as more reviewers come out comparing the Ultra C versus the Ultra C Pro, but I feel pretty confident that whatever increases in the use of the device because of the processor won't ultimately change what we're going to see in this video today. So that's my story and I'm sticking to it. Anyway, with that in mind, let's get right into these demonstrations, and then at the end I'll kind of say a few additional thoughts and give you what I think is the ultimate bottom line related to both the 3C and how that 3C compares to the new Ultra C Pro. Alright, I'll see you on the other side. Okay, for our first comparison, we're going to look at Kobo books. Let's go ahead and launch that on both devices, like so. And at first, actually, just before we go any further, let's make sure that we've got our e-ink center settings in parity with each other. And we've got the 3C here on the left, and we have the Tab Ultra C on the right. Both have about 30 on dark color enhancement, and both are in balanced mode. So that's perfect. Let's go ahead and back out. Let's take a quick look. Let's do some scrolling on each one in terms of looking at these covers. Let me start. Let me just do this one by itself. And then we'll do this one by itself. So both fairly smooth. I kind of feel like this one is a little smoother and this one's a little choppier. Let's go ahead and do those at the same time and see if we can discern that. Hard to say. Not that different, certainly. Let's go ahead and go into the dispossessed. And I'll find it here. Okay. And we do see a little bit of ghosting on the 3C. You can see those little lines right there and right there. I see a little bit there. So maybe a little bit of ghosting there. It's a little bit more subtler on the Ultra C than it is on the 3C. But let's go ahead and see how they handle page turns. Okay. Now, this one, the 3C is looking a little bit darker in the text. I'm not quite clear why. If we go ahead and go into the settings of the app and look at the font settings, and we'll do the same over here, they're actually identical, using the same font, the same size, etc. So not quite clear, but so in default, the 3C I think looks better and is easier to read. Both have a little bit of ghosting down below, but nothing of too much of note. Okay, we're tapping them at the same time. A little bit quicker on the 3C. Well, that time the Tab Ultra C was quicker. Both are pretty snappy. Do think the 3C is just a hair faster. And it certainly looks better. But not a huge difference between the two. These are pretty comparable experiences on both devices. The biggest difference being just the nice boldness of the text, which is the default here on the 3C. Presumably you could change some of the font settings to more replicate the fonts here on the Tab Ultra C, but this gives you that without any need for additional adjustment. Okay, so that's just a quick review. Probably the easiest app to compare. Pretty straightforward, simple. Both devices make excellent e-readers. Okay, now we're in the Kindle app, and we're going to look at comics. I like the Kindle app because it's one of the easier apps to work with comics. It goes cell by cell. There's other apps that do that as well. I just happen to prefer Kindle. And so, as always, we have the in this series, we'll have the Boox 3C on the left, and we've got the Tab Ultra C on the right. So what I've chosen to do for this demonstration, because we're so focused on the images, is we're going to do something that I don't normally do when I'm reading comics. We're going to put this on HD mode, and then I also set the dark color enhancement to 12. I didn't want it too dark where you start to lose some of the detail. So I set it down a little bit lighter. I tend to normally use one of the other modes, either balance fast or ultra fast, because you get a smoother experience, you get less screen flashing. But by putting it on HD mode here, we will get some more flashing and that sort of thing, but we're also going to get the best image. So I just wanted the image to be kind of forefront. And maybe what we'll do is we'll go through the comic a little bit first on HD, and then switch over to a balance mode for a few cells just to have a comparison there. But we'll start here with HD. Already seeing some ghosting. We're going to see quite a bit of ghosting here, particularly on the HD mode. And let's go ahead and advance. Oops. Now we're going cell by cell. You'll notice that white bars hide ghosting much more than dark bars, and so we'll see the comic switch from dark to light. So just notice that you see very little ghosting in the white bars, and more ghosting in the black ones. We've got a little bit extra ghosting going on here. You can see that right across Grimlock's eyes. Not as much ghosting here. Okay, the screen refreshed, so we're not seeing much in the black bars this time around. Generally fairly comparable. We do see some differences in the coloration. You know, this is a little more reddish, this box here, where this one's a little more yellow. Generally speaking, because the limitations of Kaleido, I don't know what the actual original image looks like, but it's probably a different color than either of these. One of the really amazing things about the Kaleido technology is with 4,000 colors, they use a lot of software gimmicks and tricks to kind of help fill in the details. But the color reproduction, the accuracy of that can suffer as a result. But you can't tell that by just looking at the image. You would actually have to see the source material. So despite those limitations, I think they do an amazing job with the technology. Okay, a lot more. So here's an example of what I was talking about. You can see a lot of ghosting down here in the bottom of the black bar. Not quite as much over here in this case. You do see some ghosting in the image. You can see a little bit of the former text bubble, a little bit over here as well. Let me go ahead and refresh both screens so you can, we'll do it one at a time so you can see the difference. See, a lot of that goes away, and so on. Here you see very obvious ghosting of a dialog box right here. You see it over here too, but for some reason it's shifted over to the left. So both screens suffer from ghosting, but it kind of behaves differently. Is one better than the other? It's kind of hard to say. Let me go ahead and refresh these images. Okay, let's just do a few more cells, kind of compare between the two. In this image, I feel like this part of Grimlock is a little bolder and sharper, and this one's a little more muted. And you certainly see some ghosting. You can see a little box there. You can see it over here too, but it's not quite as pronounced. Not tremendous differences between the two devices, though. They're, I would say, much more in parity than not. Let's go ahead and switch over to balance mode. And we'll see how they behave differently there. We'll go ahead and refresh each screen, like so. Okay. See, a lot smoother now as we navigate. Still a lot of ghosting. Again, the ghosting's different. You can see it both above and below in each image. A little more subtler here on top than it is over here. About the same, roughly. down below. Maybe a little more subtler here. Very small nuanced differences between the two screens. Generally both pretty snappy. Just moving almost in concert with each other. Again, the black is going to just show off much more ghosting. The white background in images will hide it better. Okay. I think that's a good example. Not identical to each other in performance, but the difference is pretty minimal in my opinion. Both have great experiences. Both do a great job of reproducing the, maybe not accurately, but certainly showing off the different colors in the comic book. And without the original, I have no problem with any variations of the Kaleido 3 screen. Yeah, so comics look pretty good, and honestly, I think these are equal to each other effectively. I don't see one device dominating the other. They're both handling this pretty much in similar fashion. Next up is Flipster. Now, Flipster is a magazine app. It may not be the best magazine app out there, but I like to use it because it allows me to use my library card to download magazines for free for a short period of time. But I appreciate it for that reason, and so we're going to use that. So let's go ahead and launch it on each device. So we'll start here with the covers. Not quite sure why this displays a 2-column and this displays a 3-column. If we look at our e-ink settings, we're both using fast, again, 3C over here, Tab Ultra C over here, and we set dark enhancement around 16 for some reason, and I can't actually remember why I set it to that. Let's go ahead and just do a scrolling of the magazine covers. I think this is one of the great examples where color is so great on these devices. And we certainly know all the limitations of color. They've only displaying 4,000 colors, for example. We know the PPI of both devices is 150, but it just looks amazing. And if you look closely, of course, you can see some of the pixelation if you really focus in certain areas. But at a glance, very effective. So that's that. We'll do some scrolling over here. Again, they all look great. Don't really see any type of tangible difference so far. Let's go ahead and go in. I've downloaded a magazine. We've got Consumer Reports here. So, okay. And again, interesting how the colors come out differently. You can see here in the middle where it says top picks, this is in red, this is in green. No idea which one is more accurate. Not even sure it really matters. We're getting a little bit of ghosting. You can see a little bit of ghosting over here. And you see some over here, like right there. There's a little bar in the black area. But not as bad with the ghosting as it is over here. Let's go ahead and swipe. Again, ghosting on both images seems a little worse here on the right. Let's go ahead and refresh. So let's look at this image. I'm going to go ahead and refresh it. Okay, the ghosting goes away. Now it becomes more obvious now that you have a comparison. Let's go ahead and refresh the screen as well. Okay, so yeah, so far getting a little more ghosting here with the Ultra C than we're seeing on the 3C. Both very snappy. Okay. Let's go ahead and do a quick double tap here. That brings up the text. We'll pinch to zoom to get that text there on the screen. Do the same thing here. Both quite responsive. And then you can move it around. Go over here. But you notice how this, as I move the screen, it's doing a good job of adjusting some of the ghosting. You do see some ghosting here in the image, but in the white spaces and in the text, you can hardly make out any ghosting at all. And that's true on this device as well. Oops. There we go. Again, some ghosting in the image, but not in the white spaces. Okay, let's keep going. Very similar performance. Again, if you look at the monitor, not much ghosting, maybe just a little bit, quite a bit more ghosting here. Let's do a refresh to see how that changes. We'll focus on this image first. Okay, didn't change that much. Let's take a look at this image. Yeah, that did change. So that's what we're seeing. We're seeing just a little bit more ghosting here on the Ultra C, a little bit less here. Not a major issue, not a huge issue, but subtly. The 3C seems to be doing quite a bit better, both handling pitching to zoom quite well. Let's go back there. Yeah, we're getting quite a bit of ghosting on this image, I think. Yeah, you can see it here in the black bar, and it's going over. It seems a little bolder here. This is a great example of the differences in ghosting. It seems a little more striking on this device, but certainly present here as well. I do find the colors just a little bit bolder on the right. It might be my imagination. But it seems just a touch more muted on the left, not by much. And again, I may be kidding myself, but certainly ghosting just a touch more prominent on the Ultra C. That I can feel confident about. Okay, yeah, both really handling it very well. Again, differences between these two devices appears really subtle, but I'm going to give a little bit of a slight nod here because of the slightly darker ghosting, or more prevalent ghosting rather, on the Ultra C. But that's the slimmest of margins between these two, both doing Flipster quite well. Okay, so now we turn to Google News. And I like to show off this app because it's an interesting mix of scrolling. You can see the performance as you click on various articles and what have you. Let's take a look at our e-ink settings on each one. Okay, we're on balance mode in each, and we have dark color enhancement around 18. Now, in addition to that, both apps are optimized a little bit as well. So if we click on the optimize button or the app optimization, you'll notice that the DPI setting is set to the max level. And that's what causes the images to be so large on the screen. If I cut it down in half, see, now we move to a 2-column format. But I kind of like the looks when it fills the entire screen, so we'll just go ahead and work with that. Okay. All right, let's do a little bit of scrolling here. Oops, accidentally. Pretty good. Okay. Anyway, since we're both at the same article, again, both as we're scrolling are doing a great job of keeping the ghosting for the most part out of the white areas. Do notice there's an interesting difference. I think I see a little bit of ghosting here. I certainly think I see a lot of ghosting in these kind of diagonal lines, but let's validate that. Let's refresh each screen. Let's see if that ghosting goes away. I think it did. And let's take a look at this screen. That definitely went away. So a little more obvious ghosting again with the Ultra C. Let's go into this article and see what that looks like. Okay, a little quicker over here. Got a little bit of ghosting. You can see it right there. Not as much, a little bit over here. Not quite as much. It's a little more obvious for once on the 3C. You can see a lot of ghosting now in this pink area. So it's keeping it out of the white areas quite well, but not so much the slightly darker image. Although we're getting a little bit of ghosting in the white image here as well. You can see quite a bit here on the side. Let me refresh that out just to see, and that goes away. So a little bit of ghosting, kind of subtle, not too bad. Okay, all right. Let's compare over here. Same more ghosting in the image. Seems a little bit better in the white areas on this one, but again, not seeing a huge difference. You're seeing, again, ghosting here in this Get Started button. But not any huge difference, very subtle differences between the two. Let me see if I can scroll these at the same time. Those seem pretty smooth. Keeping in mind the way that I'm reaching, it's hard to just kind of swipe them at the same rate. So that's really more reflective of me than it is of the device. Just kind of looking at these two images. Boy, they look, this one looks a little darker than this one, but very subtly so, not significant at all. Yeah, it's really hard to make out differences unless you really look at it, and then you're kind of wondering, am I seeing something, or is there actually a difference there? Let's go into this article. Okay, both loaded quite well. We'll scroll here with the Ultra C. Yeah, I'm hard-pressed to see any material differences. Again, the ghosting is not identical between the two devices. Sometimes one has heavier ghosting than the other, or vice versa, but overall, quite comparable. It's really nitpicking to see significant differences between these two devices. Okay, that's Google News. Okay, when you think of e-ink devices, e-readers, e-note takers, what you tend not to think of is YouTube. But every time I do these reviews, people ask me how YouTube performs. And it is an interesting test, not just of the video itself, but also how good the speakers sound. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at that here. Let's go ahead and check our settings. So if we go into the e-ink center, we are at 16 for dark enhancement. We're going to do ultra fast on this one. And if we come over here, we're going to see the same settings, and they also have the same DPI settings, which is kind of interesting, given the fact that if you look at the YouTube icon and these icons to the right, and you compare that here, one is bigger than the other. And I can't account for that difference because as far as I can tell, the settings are the same. Let's go ahead and take a look at the speakers as well. I meant to do that. So we'll go, yeah, just short, shy of halfway. That seems like a good way to go. And same there, maybe just a little bit more. There we go. Okay. All right, well, why don't we find a video, and all right, we'll do this one, this worst game ever video. So we'll start here with the 3C. We'll play it for a little bit, see how it handles ghosting, refreshing, and how the speakers sound. Okay, let's give it a go.
Let me tell you about a game that was never even really supposed to see the light of day. A game that was made entirely with taking the piss in mind. A game crafted by a teenager with a demanding publishing company breathing down his neck while he was busy trying to deal with other important things, such as exams and, being a child. A game birthed from sheer spite and bristling hormonal anger. A game notorious in the retro computing scene as being one of the worst, if not the worst, games ever put to market. That game is Squidge for the ZX Spectrum. In the 1980s, and in the heyday of computers, such as the Commodore 64 and ZX Spectrum, the still young gaming scene had a heck of a lot to offer anyone wanting to rack up scores at home rather than at the arcades.
Okay.
New titles seem to be...
Let's compare that then over here.
Let me tell you about a game that was never even really supposed to see the light of day. A game that was made entirely with taking the piss in mind. A game crafted by a teenager with a demanding publishing company breathing down his neck while he was busy trying to deal with other important things, such as exams and, being a child. A game birthed from sheer spite and bristling hormonal anger. A game notorious in the retro computing scene as being one of the worst, if not the worst, games ever put to market. That game is Squidge for the ZX Spectrum. In the 1980s, and in the heyday of computers, such as the Commodore 64 and ZX Spectrum, the still young gaming scene had a heck of a lot to offer anyone wanting to rack up scores at home rather than at the arcades. New titles seem to be churning out all the time.
All right. Interesting in the freeze frame, getting a lot more ghosting on this image than this one. Although, when I did the playback, I really didn't discern a particular difference between the two. Let's see if we can move to another video that might have a little more motion to it. And we're going to go ahead and, oh, perfect. All right, we'll do that concert. And there we go. Okay. And actually, let's go ahead and we'll go over here. And just before we do, I think I have the volume a little bit higher on this one, so we'll turn it down just a little bit. Okay. All right. Okay, so a lot more ghosts. You got a lot more motion in the video. It's introducing a lot more ghosting. Let's see how this one handles that. All right, well, I don't know if you noticed this, but I sure did. I saw quite a bit more ghosting, actually, particularly toward the end of the clip on the Ultra C than I saw over here. And I probably have to go back in the video and take another listen, but I kind of liked the speakers a little bit better from the 3C. I mean, neither have speakers that are going to blow you away. They're about what you'd expect for a device like this, but I just thought it was just a little bit cleaner on the 3C, but we played it. You can make your own judgment of which you like better, but that is a demonstration of how each device is handling YouTube. I thought I'd take a moment to kind of demonstrate the front lighting on each device and how that looks. So let's go ahead and bring this down, and we're going to start And I should point out that we haven't had any front lighting on any of the demonstrations. So this is the first time we're turning on front lighting in this video. Let's go ahead and go full cold on this one, like so, and we'll repeat that over here. Okay. Both seem equally bright to me. The 3C has a little bit of, I maybe a slight pinkish hue to the color, and this one may be a slightly more, a touch yellowish, for lack of a better way to phrase that. Let's go ahead and go on to full. Oh, just before we do, I think both devices show really good consistency in the distribution of the front light. Let me refresh both screens so we get the best look at it. I will point something out. The 3C does have this bar. You can barely see it, but it's on the left side. It goes about to there, and it consistently goes all the way up to the top. We don't see that on the Tab C. This is not as a result of the front lighting. There's something about the screen that this bar shows up every once in a while, doesn't fully refresh away. So every device from Boox seems to have one flaw, and that seems to be at least my version of the 3C. Anyway, let's go ahead and look at complete warm lighting, like so. Okay. Tab Ultra C seems a little oranger. The 3C a little subtler toward the peach color. Kind of like the 3C a little bit better. It's not quite as intense, but that's a very small small difference between the two. Just kind of go halfway on each, I suppose. See how that compares. That's actually a little further along, isn't it? Huh. Okay. You can see slight differences in the coloration, but ultimately functionally they're both pretty much in the same place. I kind of prefer the 3C better, but I think that's an aesthetic preference on my part. I don't see any particular reason to favor one device over the other from a functional perspective. They're both quite good, both very even in their distribution, no flaws that I can see related to the front lighting. All right, I just wanted to take a quick moment to talk about the colors on the screen, and there's really no reason to compare the devices at this point. So we've gone ahead and turned off the Ultra C, but I did want to make a couple points. The first point is that when you don't have front lighting on, it really does mute a lot of the colors in the note-taking app, and you can kind of see that here. So if we go ahead and turn on cold lighting, now you can see a lot of the colors now jump at you that had kind of gone into the background before. And this is, by the way, all the colors that are available in the note-taking app. This is all drawn using the ballpoint pen with 7 thickness. And then here's an example of the different pen types. There's 6 in all, with 2 versions of the pencil. And so this scribble goes with this text, and so on. These were all done in navy blue with a 10 thickness. So this gives you a little bit of sense of what pens are available and what colors are available in the note-taking app. All right, let me go over one more thing before we get to kind of final thoughts. I wanted to point another really important difference between these two devices. This is also true not just of the Ultra C, but the Ultra C Pro has the same form factor. And that's basically, if you look at the side of the device, it's a very, it's very kind of a blocky, edge with, kind of 2 edges right? And so the reason why I'm mentioning that to you is I think visually it looks really good. I like the look of it. But when you're holding it, the weight of the device plus those edges, like at first it's not a big deal. I can barely feel anything. But those do kind of grind on you after time. So if you're thinking of buying the device and holding it, in your hand, particularly one-handed, for any extended period of time, that's going to be a little more difficult to do comfortably with the Ultra C versus the 3C or the Ultra C Pro. The reason being because the 3C has more of a curved corner, which you can kind of see there. So when you're holding it, it doesn't feel hard on the hands at all. You don't feel the edges of the edge of the screen. So it's much more comfortable for this type of a grip. So just wanted to mention that in addition to all the examples we saw. So just to kind of summarize my thinking around these demonstrations is, first off, I think the 3C, just objectively on its own, really did well in handling all of these apps. I didn't see any issues at all. I thought it was pretty smooth and fluid in most of these scenarios. I think the biggest criticism I have of the 3C, again in isolation, it is a criticism well known for any device that has a Kaleido 3 screen, and that is ghosting. You're going to get a lot of ghosting. And the way that works really depends on you. For me personally, I enjoy the color so much, I enjoy the positive aspects of the device so much, that the ghosting that is present to me is more in the background, it's more white noise, and for the most part, I can kind of tune it out, if you will. It doesn't bother me, in other words. Other people are different. Other people are very sensitive to the ghosting, and that they focus on that immediately, and it's distracting to their experience. So hopefully these demonstrations, which clearly showed the ghosting in all the apps, are enough for you to know maybe what camp you might be in if you're making a buying decision about Kaleido 3 versus a non-Kaleido 3 device. So that leaves us with the last question. The other big objective of the video is, what are the differences between the 3C and the Tab Ultra Pro, which is proxied here by the Tab Ultra C, and which device should you buy? What criteria should you think about? Well, I think the first major observation I have, and this came through most of the videos, is, yeah, it's true. Every once in a while I'd say, oh, I think this device is a little bit better than the other one, or vice versa. But the reality is, if you take a step back and you kind of take it all in, these devices pretty much went toe for toe against each other. And there are some nuances on each side, but quite honestly, I think the performance was great on each, and I don't really see or feel compelled to name a winner between the two. So you're not too worried about the performance of either one. Here's another way to think about it. If you were thinking about going for the 3C, and then a lot of the stats of the Pro was kind of catching your eye, and you thought, well, maybe that's a better performing device, it might be better performing, and certainly in certain circumstances it will take advantage of the RAM and the processor. But in terms of the apps that we saw today, it's pretty agnostic. I think both of them handle them just fine, and there's no advantage to paying that extra, I believe, $150 for the Ultra C Pro over the 3C. So based on that alone, you'd probably want to go with the 3C. Now, some people talk about the difference in terms of, well, you want to go with the 3C as it relates to note-taking and consumption, right, reading, etc., and you want to go with the Pro as it relates to productivity. And I guess that's a pretty fair way of looking at it. I would look at it a little bit more starkly, though. I would say, are you really looking for something that has kind of a keyboard attachment, that you can type notes? What circumstance would you need the additional processing power that you get with the Pro? Because you're also going to get weight. You're also going to get, obviously it's more expensive. So there's a lot of cons that actually come with that. And unless you have a use case that really takes advantage of those, those additional stats from RAM and processor, then I think that you probably should really focus on the 3C instead. It handles all the basics solidly. It handles the reading, the note-taking, all the apps we covered today. Looked great on the device, and I would argue that if you're considering the two, really think about, well, what is the advantage? What are you getting for that $150? Because I think this video shows that a lot of things that, everything we throw at the 3C, it could handle just fine. So there really should be, in my opinion, a compelling reason to go for the Pro line. And so here's something to think about. It may not necessarily just be because it has a keyboard cover. The device, we didn't show it today, but there is the ability in most Boox devices to have a Bluetooth connection, and you can actually connect a keyboard and, yes, even a mouse to the device. I'm hoping actually to do a future video in the next week or so about that type of a setup and how responsive it is, etc. But don't think that if you go with the 3C that you're completely shut out from having a keyboard typing experience. It's absolutely still in the cards. You just won't have a keyboard that's integrated into the cover of the device. So anyway, I hope this is helpful for you. I hope that you have a better sense of how the 3C performs and a better sense of whether it actually makes sense to get the Pro model or not. So if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. Otherwise, there'll be more videos to come, and I will see you then.